Which direction is this truck trouble that planet but Jacob's toss. Like, so the link to the video will be in the description below. Go and check them out. So let's into this direction in 3, 2, 1. Truck trouble. Oh.
Halfway through Nebraska. Garrett Mitchell was halfway through Nebraska on Interstate 80, hauling 20 tons of steel beams to Denver, when he felt something move inside his belly. At first, he thought it was gas or muscle spasms from too much truck stop coffee. But then it happened again, a distinct flutter, like something was rolling over inside him. Garrett pulled his semi to the shoulder, hands shaking.
Oh, you look like a baby bump.
On the wheel, and lifted his shirt. His stomach, which he'd assumed was just weight gained from months on the road, was rounder and firmer than he remembered.
Yeah, you look like a baby bump.
That's when the terrifying truth hit him. Those weren't muscle spasms.
No.
That was a baby kicking. And Garrett had no idea how it got there. Garrett Mitchell was 34 years old and had been driving long-haul trucks for 8 years. He lived on the road more than he lived anywhere else, hauling freight from coast to coast, sleeping in the cab of his truck, eating at diners and rest stops, listening to audiobooks during the endless hours of highway driving. Garrett had no permanent address. His mail went to a P.O. box in Omaha where his sister lived. His belongings fit in 2 duffel bags stored behind his seat. He owned nothing except his clothes, his truck, and his commercial driver's license. This lifestyle suited Garrett perfectly. He'd grown up in a small town in Iowa where everyone knew everyone's business. When Garrett had transitioned at 23, the gossip and judgment had been unbearable. People stared at him in grocery stores. Former classmates asked invasive questions. His own parents struggled to use his correct name and pronouns. So Garrett had gotten his CDL, bought a used truck, and hit the road. On the highway, nobody cared who you were or where you came from. They only cared if you could drive safely and deliver your cargo on time. Garrett was excellent at both. He'd spent 8 years moving across the country, state to state, job to job. He'd seen every major city and countless small towns. He'd driven through snowstorms in Montana and heat waves in Arizona. The truck was his home, the highway his neighborhood, and other truckers his only real community. Last winter, though, something had changed. December had found
that is totally a baby bump.
Garrett stranded in Reno during a snowstorm. The highways had closed, and all the truck stops were packed with drivers waiting out the weather. Garrett had ended up at a small diner, nursing coffee and killing time. That's where he'd met Ben Sullivan. Ben was another trucker, mid-30s, with an easy smile and stories that made Garrett laugh. They'd started talking and hadn't stopped for 6 hours. They'd exchanged stories about the worst roads they'd driven, the strangest cargo they'd hauled, the best diners hidden in forgotten towns. When the storm cleared 2 days later, they'd both been reluctant to leave. Ben had suggested they convoy together for a while. Their routes were heading the same direction anyway. Garrett had agreed. For 2 weeks, Garrett and Ben had traveled together across Nevada, Utah, and into Colorado. They'd parked their trucks side by side at night, shared meals at diners, talked over CB radio during long stretches of empty highway. It was the closest thing to friendship, maybe more than friendship, that Garrett had experienced in years. Ben had eventually asked if Garrett wanted to meet up again after their current jobs finished. Maybe they could coordinate routes, travel together more regularly, see where things went. Garrett had panicked. The vulnerability of that suggestion, the possibility of caring about someone and having them leave, had terrified him. He'd made excuses about his schedule being unpredictable, about preferring to work alone. Ben had looked hurt but hadn't pushed. When they'd reached Denver, they'd gone their separate ways. Ben had headed north to Wyoming. Garrett had picked up a load heading east. Garrett had told himself it was for the best. Getting attached to someone was dangerous. Better to keep moving, keep his distance, stay safe in his solitude. That had been in late December. By January, Garrett had convinced himself he'd made the right choice. By February, he was trying not to think about Ben at all. What Garrett hadn't realized was that those 2 weeks together had left him with more than just memories. March brought strange changes to Garrett's body. He felt tired constantly, even after a full night's sleep in his truck. He was hungry all the time, stopping at every rest stop for food. His stomach was getting bigger despite him eating the same greasy diner food he'd always eaten. Garrett assumed he was just getting out of shape. Truckers gained weight easily, long hours sitting, irregular meals, no exercise. He told himself he'd start working out when he had time, maybe do some push-ups at rest stops. But the exhaustion got worse. The nausea started. Garrett would be driving along and suddenly need to pull over, fighting the urge to vomit. He'd blamed it on bad food, on stress, on anything except the truth his mind refused to consider. By April, Garrett's clothes weren't fitting right. His belly was noticeably rounder, pushing against his shirt. Other truckers at stops occasionally made jokes about him getting a trucker gut. Garrett had laughed along, embarrassed but not yet alarmed. He'd made it to late April, almost 5 months, before the kicking
Yeah.
started. When Garrett felt that first movement while driving through Nebraska, his entire world stopped. He'd pulled to the shoulder, turned off the engine, and sat in complete silence, hand on his belly, waiting to see if it would happen again. It did. A distinct flutter, then a stronger movement, like something pushing from the inside. Garrett's mind raced through every possible explanation except the one that was obviously true. Muscle
Yeah.
spasms, gas bubbles, internal injury, anything but pregnancy. But deep down, Garrett knew. He'd spent years researching transgender health. He knew that testosterone wasn't birth control. He knew that as long as he had his reproductive organs, pregnancy was theoretically possible. He'd just never believed
Proof.
it would happen to him. Garrett thought back to December, to those 2 weeks with Ben. They'd been intimate 3 times during those 2 weeks. They hadn't used
Really?
protection because Garrett had genuinely believed he couldn't get pregnant. 10
Yeah.
years without a period. 10 years on testosterone. It had seemed impossible. But here Garrett was, sitting in his truck on the side of Interstate 80, feeling a baby move inside him.
Yep. That
Garrett
is
didn't
by
know what
people.
to do. He'd been on the road for 4 months, driving continuously, with no prenatal care, no doctor visits, no idea how far along he was or if the baby was healthy. He'd been lifting heavy cargo, working 12-hour days, living on coffee and diner food. He'd done everything wrong for a pregnant person to do. Panic set in. Garrett grabbed his phone, searching for the nearest hospital. Omaha was 40 miles ahead. He could get there in an hour. But fear paralyzed him. Walking into a hospital as a visibly masculine man with a pregnant belly would raise questions he wasn't ready to answer.
Yeah.
People would stare. Staff would whisper. The privacy he'd built his entire life around would shatter. Garrett sat in his truck for
Proof.
30 minutes, trying to decide what to do. Finally, he compromised with himself. He wouldn't go to a hospital, but he'd find a clinic. Somewhere small and discreet where he could get checked out without causing a scene. 2 hours later, Garrett found a small women's health clinic on the outskirts of Lincoln, Nebraska. He walked in wearing his baggiest hoodie, trying to hide his belly, trying to look like he belonged there. The receptionist looked confused when Garrett asked for a prenatal appointment. He'd quietly explained he was transgender and possibly pregnant. The receptionist had recovered quickly and scheduled him with a nurse practitioner. The examination confirmed what Garrett already knew. He was pregnant. Based on measurements and the baby's development, the nurse practitioner estimated he was about 22 weeks along, over 5 months. Garrett sat on the examination table,
Oh, 5 months.
numb,
Wow.
as the nurse practitioner explained everything. The baby appeared healthy despite Garrett's lack of prenatal care.
Wow.
But he
That's
needed to
good.
stop testosterone immediately, start taking prenatal vitamins, reduce his work hours, and find consistent medical care. The nurse practitioner also gently pointed out that Garrett needed to make decisions about his living
Yeah.
situation. Living in a truck, driving 12 hours a day, lifting heavy cargo. None of that was sustainable for the remaining months of pregnancy or for caring for a newborn. Garrett had nodded, agreeing with everything, but inside he was spiraling. His entire life was structured around the truck, around constant movement. He had no home, no savings for an apartment, no job that didn't involve driving. How was he supposed to stop everything and prepare for a baby he'd never planned for? The nurse practitioner gave Garrett a list of resources, shelters for homeless pregnant people, financial assistance programs, adoption agencies. Garrett took the papers, but didn't read them. He just wanted to get back to his truck, to the familiar safety of the highway. For 3 days, Garrett kept driving. He had a load to deliver in Denver. He'd finish the job, collect his payment, and then figure out what to do. But driving became harder as the reality of pregnancy set in. Every bump in the road made Garrett worry about the baby. Every hour in the driver's seat made his back ache. He couldn't stop thinking about the nurse practitioner's words. This lifestyle wasn't sustainable. Garrett needed help. He needed to
Who?
tell someone. But the only person he could think of was Ben, and Garrett had no idea how to reach him. They'd exchanged phone numbers in December, but Garrett had deleted the contact in January, trying to move on. Garrett tried calling the trucking company Ben worked for, but they wouldn't give out driver contact
Wow.
information. He tried posting on trucker forums, asking if anyone knew Ben Sullivan from Wyoming. No responses. By the time Garrett reached Denver, he'd made a decision. He'd park the truck, use his last paycheck to rent a cheap motel room, and figure out what came next. He couldn't keep driving. He couldn't keep pretending everything was fine.
Yeah.
Garrett was at a truck stop outside Denver,
Oh.
fueling up his rig, when he heard a familiar voice.
Green.
Garrett? Is that really you? Garrett turned around. Ben was standing there, looking shocked and happy, walking over with that easy smile Garrett remembered. They talked for 10 minutes, awkward small talk about routes and weather. Ben
Yeah.
said he was heading south to New Mexico. Garrett said he'd
New
just finished a
Mexico.
delivery. Then Ben noticed. His eyes dropped to Garrett's belly, visible now even through his hoodie. Ben's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something Garrett couldn't identify. Garrett, are you? Garrett nodded, unable to
Yep.
speak.
Yep. That's a baby bump.
Tears started streaming down his face before he could stop them. 5 months of fear and loneliness and pretending everything was fine came crashing down. Ben guided Garrett to sit at a picnic table. Garrett told him everything. The pregnancy, the lack of prenatal care, the months of denying reality, the impossible situation of living in a truck with a baby coming. When Garrett finished, Ben was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "Is it mine?" "Yes," Garrett whispered. "From
Yeah.
December. I didn't know until a few days
You're
ago.
the father.
I thought I couldn't. I never imagined." Ben nodded slowly, processing. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. You're not living in that truck anymore. You're coming with me to Cheyenne. I rent a small house there between the
Send,
halls. It's not
send
much,
mom.
but it's got a roof and a bed and it's safe. You can stay there until the baby comes. Ben, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. That's my kid too, Garrett. You shouldn't have to do this alone. 2 weeks later, Garrett was living in Ben's small house in Cheyenne. It was strange to sleep in a real bed, to wake up in the same place every morning, to not hear the constant hum of highway traffic. Ben continued taking short hauls so he could be home regularly. He helped Garrett find a local clinic for prenatal care. He went to every appointment, asked questions, learned everything about pregnancy and newborn care. At first, they were careful around each other. Polite. They slept in separate rooms. They talked about practical things, doctor appointments, baby supplies, what to name their daughter. But slowly, something shifted. Ben would make Garrett breakfast before his appointments. Garrett would wait up for Ben when he came home from short
Oh,
hauls.
that's really
They'd
nice.
sit on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, finding their way back to the easy connection they'd had in December. One night at 28 weeks, Garrett felt the baby kick strongly.
The
Without
baby.
thinking, he'd grabbed Ben's hand and placed it on his belly. Ben's face had lit up with wonder when he felt his daughter move. They'd stayed like that for an hour, Ben's hand on Garrett's belly, talking quietly about their hopes and fears for the future. By 30 weeks, they'd stopped pretending they were just co-parents preparing for a baby. They were falling in love, or maybe falling back into the love they'd run from in December. Ben never made Garrett
Yeah.
feel ashamed or embarrassed about his pregnant body. He'd rub Garrett's aching back without being asked. He'd run out at midnight to get whatever food Garrett was craving. He'd tell Garrett he was beautiful, that the pregnancy made him more himself, not less.
Who?
At 32 weeks, during an ultrasound, they learned they were having a daughter. Ben cried. Garrett felt
Oh,
overwhelmed, but deeply, cautiously happy. That night, Ben had taken Garrett's
congrats.
hand and said the words Garrett had been too afraid to hope for. "I love you. Not just because of the baby. I loved you in December, and I love you now, and I want to build a life with you. If you'll have me." Garrett had cried and said yes. At 38
Oh, what a cute baby.
weeks,
Oh.
Garrett went into labor. Ben drove him to the hospital, stayed through 14 hours of labor, held Garrett's hand through every contraction, and cut the umbilical cord when their daughter was born. They named her Riley. 6 pounds, 10 ounces. Perfect and healthy. Today, Riley is 4 months old. Garrett and Ben are partners in every
Oh, what a cute baby. Oh.
sense of the word. Co-parents, lovers, a family. They bought a slightly bigger house in Cheyenne with a nursery for Riley and space for both of them. Ben still takes short hauls to pay the bills, but he's home most nights. Garrett is learning to be still, to stay in one place, to be a father and a partner. It's harder than
Yeah.
he expected, but better than he ever imagined. They're planning to get married next spring in a small ceremony with just family and a few trucker friends. Garrett
Oh,
never
that's
thought
sweet.
he'd have
That's really
this:
sweet.
a home,
Oh,
a partner who loved him completely, a daughter who looks at him like he's her whole world. Garrett learned that the constant movement he'd thought was freedom was actually running from what he wanted most. And the roots he'd been afraid to put down became the foundation of the most beautiful life he could have imagined. Ben proved that love means accepting someone exactly as they are: pregnant belly, complicated history, fears and all. He never asked Garrett to be anything other than himself. Sometimes the person you're meant to be with shows up in a snowstorm, in a diner, in the middle of nowhere. And sometimes love means getting a second chance to choose each other, this time with eyes wide open and hearts fully committed. Would you have given Ben a second chance? Can love that starts in 2 weeks really last
I would. I would give Bean a second sense. Yeah.
a lifetime? Drop your thoughts below. If this story taught you that family is built by choice, not just biology, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about finding love in unexpected places and building homes where you thought you'd only find
Comment down below if we will give Bean a second sense. Comment down below. Okay, I will. I will give Bean a second sense.
highway. Because Garrett and Ben prove that home isn't where you park your truck.
Yeah.
It's wherever your family is waiting for you to come back.
Woo. So we two. That was this truck over the planet by JethroCool. The link to the video will be the description below. Go and check them out and drop a like if you like. And comment down below if you want to see more reaction like this one. And subscribe if you are new. And click the bell so you can be notified when I upload in my bye. Wow.